Alrighty. Dr. Tom LaHue, this is a long-awaited podcast for me. I caught your stuff on YouTube maybe 3-4 months ago, and I was just enamored with it. I'd consumed it all, I think in typical Type 7 style. That said, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the listeners, tell them what it is you do, and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Tom LaHue, and I've come from a ministry background. For the last 30 years, my wife and I have been working in local churches and teaching part time in colleges and Christian colleges, mostly in ministry and that kind of thing. And then recently, I've transitioned to where now I'm doing the church work part time, and I do Enneagram coaching full time. So I have a channel on YouTube, Dr. Tom LaHue, LaHue. You can look that up on YouTube. And through that, I've started coaching people using the Enneagram, helping them get out of whatever they feel stuck in life, and sometimes relationship coaching. And now I've started to offer classes as well on Enneagram and topics related to that and self development and improvement.
Yeah, as I was doing a little bit of research for this podcast, I kind of came across, I guess it'd be a synopsis of some of the things you've done in your life. You have 3 master's degrees, a doctorate, and some of your titles include an adjunct professor at 3 different colleges, pastor for over 30 years, marriage coach. And the thing that I think that is coolest is that it seems to be your family's involved in like the whole business as a whole. If you were to zoom out, like your wife's involved, your kids are involved. Kind of talk me through that. What's that been like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, that's what happened is, when I first learned about the Enneagram, one of my daughters, Grace, who's an 8 wing 7, I'm a 7 wing 6, but she went to a ministry conference and they were talking about the Enneagram. And she came home and was like, Dad, you should check this out. And I thought, I don't know. I mean, I got Myers-Briggs, I understand DISC and all these things. I mean, another personality profile. And I was just quite resistant because I don't know. I felt like I had enough tools to I understood people basically. But then when
Right.
I started reading about it, it stung a little bit. At first it's like, oh yeah, this description sounds really cool, but then the Enneagram has a way of like biting in and kind of scratching you where it hurts, and that's exactly what happened. And my family, they all kind of figured out their types, and we've just begun this discussion in our home that's never stopped. We just everything from we're watching TV shows and we talk about the types, maybe represented in those shows. But yeah, what a fantastic tool for helping us understand how to get along with people, and what people's expectations are, kind of their software system they're running. And that at the end of the day was what really began to help me see the value of it. Was as a pastor, as a Christian worker, you're constantly working with people, and
Mhm.
sometimes, actually a lot of times, it seems like people are doing things that don't make sense. Like, why would they do this? And then as you begin to understand the personality types, it starts to help you make sense of why people do what we do sometimes.
Yeah. After your daughter convinced you to take the test and you were kind of looking into everything, were you like, oh, this makes 100% sense?
Yeah, and I never took a test. I just opened up the little, that we had a book. I think it was like the Enneagram Made Easy. It's a simple little cartoony kind of book. And I just read the descriptions and I went one,
Wow.
two, three, four, five, six. Six sounded close. And then when I hit 7, I was like, yep, that's it. I'm a 7, no question.
Yeah.
And I never questioned that. It just I knew immediately. And a lot of people are like that. They just read the simple description and they know immediately. Some people have a lot harder time figuring out their type. It takes them a little bit longer, but I was one of those that I knew immediately. I was a 7. Yeah.
Yeah, you are right. It does kind of bite a little bit when you're reading it. You're like, oh yeah, that's me, that's me. And then it'll get to like something that's, I don't know, could be conceived as negative. Like for sevens, for example, it's avoiding the feeling of boredom. When I heard that one, I was like, ouch, come on. Like, and then
Yeah.
you look back, you're like, man, it's kind of true. Everything I do, I reframe into a positive light just so I don't have to go through those emotions.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to, what is the Enneagram? So when I was looking at your YouTube channel, you have, I don't know, probably reviewed in essence 3 or 4 different books that I've seen. Um, After reading all of those, like how would you sum up the Enneagram?
Yeah. Yeah, and I've read a lot more than 3 or 4 books.
I'm sure.
Yeah, because one of the things about sevens is when we get passionate about something, we will overperform everybody. We will just out if we're excited about it, if we're
Right.
enthusiastic about it, we will go past eights and ones and threes and everybody else. It's when we're not excited about something that it feels like so much burden and work to stay committed to something. But yeah, when I first started, I got every book I could get. I just ordered them all, and I just every morning for a couple of hours I would just read about this. What is this? How does this make? Because what happens with people is sometimes we learn about our own type and then we never go beyond that. Or we'll learn about our type and our wife or maybe our
Right.
kids, and then we don't really learn it as a system. And when you see it as a system, you start to see how you kind of move through the system because you are a main type, but you do kind of move around a little bit. Let's say you borrow some of the wisdom from the other types, which is a good thing. And
Mhm.
so learning it as a system is so much more helpful than just knowing your basic type. But you got to start somewhere. And that's where everybody starts is, oh, I'm a seven. So what does this mean? Or I'm a three. I would encourage listeners to really dig in and at least get a book, and not
Right.
just limit yourself to videos or podcasts, but get a book and really start to dive in. And I think the value of it will start to make itself apparent to you. What was the
Yeah.
question? I know you asked a specific question, but
No, I was just saying, like, how would you describe the Enneagram? What is it? And I think you
okay.
you did a really great job when you said it was a system. I love that you said that. When I was talking to my friend about this, he kind of knew just, like the Myers-Briggs. And when you bring it up, they're like, oh, it's in that genre of um what personality tests and whatever. Um, but I explained it to him as it's kind of like a blind spot monitoring system. Like that's the way I saw it. It was like, all right, like there's the positive things, but you really want to know what the negative things are because that's what's keeping you back in life. So
Yeah.
I really love the fact that you described it as a system. Um, if you could, what are the 9 types? Just kind of briefly go over each one. Share what they are.
Yeah. And I think the best way to do this is to kind of think of it in terms of like growing up or
Oh yeah,
as being in a family and stepping out of that family. So and realize every one of these is offensive, and I don't mean it to be offensive, it just is. And that's one of the things that's so interesting if I get to speak to like a staff or a leadership team is I kind of already know going into this meeting that this is not going to be comfortable for people. And it's kind of interesting when you begin this conversation because everybody walks in, they're like, oh great, a personality thing, we're going to learn how to work with each other. But
yeah,
at the end of the day, you're talking about lust and laziness, sloth and deceit, and you're exposing it exposes the darker side of you. It's kind of like I think of like Superman. He's got all these superpowers, but he's also got his kryptonite weakness. And every one of us comes sort of with superpowers, things that we're really good at, or things that are important to us, things we tend to do well. But then there's always this other side that's uncomfortable to talk about, but necessary to for us to really look at. When I think about going around the dial, I always say it like that. Like, let's go around the dial. Start at the top
yeah.
with number 9. 9 sits at the top, and I think for good reason. But start with 9 and think of 9 as being the infant in the family or the baby in the family. I said it's offensive, right? Just I don't mean to be a problem. Just give me my something to eat every once in a while and let me know that I'm here and that I matter to you, and I'll try not to take up a lot of space or cause any problems. Okay. And then go to the 1 and think of the 1 as being like the proverbial dad in the family.
Yep.
By the way, the 9 is called the peacemaker, and the 1 is called the perfectionist or the reformer. One of the titles is the owner of the truth. And so think of the 1 as being the dad in the family, that be responsible, do the right thing, get your schoolwork done, eat your vegetables before you go outside and play. And the sin of the 1 is anger. And then think of 2 as being the proverbial nurturing caregiver in the family, like think of mom there to take care of you, and what can I do for you, and do you need me to help you with that? The giver, the helper, and the sin
Right.
of the two is pride, because where would they be without me? They'd be lost without me. And then the three, think of the oldest child in the family, like the performer or the achiever. Look at me, watch what I can do, look what I've done, I can ride my bike without hands, I just got nominated for class president, I made the football team, look at me. Okay. And then the sin of the three is deceit, because sometimes they won't necessarily expose everything about themselves, but
Yeah.
the most positive things that make them look the best,
Yeah.
the
Hide the
four.
shortcomings.
Yeah, right. And sometimes even like the self deceit of believing that your worth comes from those accomplishments,
Yeah.
right? You got to remember that if you were to walk through a nursery at the hospital and you have 10 babies laying there, which one of them is not worth something? They all have intrinsic value, created in the image of God. We have value whether it's recognized or not. And that doesn't go away because we're 10 years old or 20 years old or 50 years old. That value is always there, but seems like twos, threes, and fours struggle with that, with
Worth.
really, yeah, with that worth and value question. And so threes take an obvious approach of add value to yourself, but that doesn't what gives you your value. But
Right.
sometimes, yeah, okay. So type fours, the individualist, the romantic. My favorite term for the fours is the healer. But anyway, fours, think of the other child in the family, the second born that's in
Yeah.
their brother's shadows or their older sister's shadows. Like, where do I belong? What am I good at? Um, who am I? And what makes me different? What sets me apart? And I don't even know that they even care about me. Maybe they wouldn't even miss me if I wasn't here. And of course, the sin of the four is envy. And envy basically is this idea that I haven't been given a fair chance at things. Like the cards are stacked against me, and you have no idea how difficult it is for me. So, any questions up till this point? Because I just kind of dominating the conversation.
No, no, I love it. I think eventually, so just so the listeners know where this is going, there's two types that I want to talk to you about just a little bit more in depth. That's 3 and 7. Those are the two that I think my listeners most likely are within. Um, that said, I resonate both with a 7 and a 3. And I think when it comes to um, the fear of a 3 being, where's your worth come from? When I was watching one of your YouTube episodes on a number 3, you were talking about worth, and you said, like, let's pretend you are a father, which I am. I have a 10-month-old son, my first one. You said, what did they do in the last, however long they've been born to be worthy of love? And they haven't done anything. So you are like, well, why would you be any different? Like, why do you
Yeah.
need to do something to prove worth to ones that you love or just others in general? And that really hit home with me. And I was like, wow. So from that point, that I actually thought I was a 3 first, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Um, from that point, I became like addicted to your stuff, and I just wanted to, take it all in, like learn a little bit more about who I am and some of my blind spots. That said, no questions yet. Let's continue on to 5, if you will.
Yeah. One last thing about threes is, there's a sense in which all of us, I envision like the Indiana Jones boulder that's chasing us. And so you'll see us moving forward. You'll see us earning 3 master's degrees. But what you don't see, and what I didn't see until I learned about the Enneagram, is it's not just I love getting information, but I hate being bored and not thinking about stuff. And
Yeah.
so if I'm excited about something, then I need to move forward with that. I feel this impulse to move forward with that. When you think about threes in particular, you can see them, we all see them accomplishing a lot. We see them doing a lot. We see them moving forward and going to the next level and all that kind of 3 speech of self-help speech. But what we want to pay attention to is what's pushing all of that? Like, what are you running from? Not what are you
Yeah.
running toward? What are you running from? And in a sense, it's kind of like this, well, if I wasn't successful, if I wasn't moving forward, if I wasn't attaining more and becoming more, well, then what would I be? What would I be doing? I I don't want to be that sort of person that's not moving forward, that's not And, that sense that I've got to wake up in the morning and I've got to prove to myself and to the world that I am a person of value, that's a great boulder that's chasing you. And if you could
Yeah.
turn around and face that, maybe you could be a little bit more thoughtful and mindful of what I actually need to be doing with my time. Maybe I don't need to be investing all of my life in this quadrant of work and money. And there's a whole areas of my life that maybe I've been ignoring, like community involvement, spirituality, and relationships, and maybe family. And it's like, are you achieving in those areas too? Or are those being ignored while you're focused on the areas that give you the rewards and the feedback that you need in order to
Yeah.
slow that boulder down?
Yeah.
Yeah, painful stuff.
Oh yeah.
I love it.
Trust me. It was like getting gut punched time and time again. It's funny you said, it's kind of like, each day you wake up, you're like, all right, I just need one positive affirmation from someone that I've done something good. Like that's kind of the way I see it. It's like, what can I do today that will earn me a compliment?
Yeah. Or sometimes it's internal. It's like I need to go. I always think of it like this. I need to go to bed at night believing this about myself. Like think of twos.
Yeah.
I need to go to bed at night believing I'm a good person. I'm a nice person. I'm a kind person. I'm a thoughtful person. And so even if you don't get the external reciprocation that you're looking for, even if you don't get the message back, the feedback that you would like, it's important that I go to bed at night as a one, believing I'm a good person, or as a nine, I'm a peace loving, kind, thoughtful person that gives space to people, or a two, I'm a loving, gentle, giving person. And it's good. I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's just how much of your actual behaviors are being motivated solely by your impulses and compulsions of your type, and how much are you actually awake and choosing to do because it's moving you toward your goals. Okay, let's go to five. All right. So when you think about that jump from 4 to 5, think about moving out of the house and like going out into the world. Like you're stepping out into the world now. So imagine that you're like, what, I don't know, what, sixth grade, something like that. And you're stepping out into this new city, this big middle school. And then here's the five. Think of the five as, I don't know what this world is going to do to me, or what it's going to tax me or exhaust me. And so fives kind of step out into the world quite timidly. Like, I want to understand the world without it engulfing me. I don't want it sapping my resources and my energy and making a bunch of demands on me. So I want to try to interact with the world kind of behind a wall and looking over the wall, studying and understanding the world without being impacted negatively by it. And think of like stepping out into this world, and that first toe in the water is the five. And then they're called the investigators or the observers. And of course, their sin is avarice or stinginess or greed. And they can be quite stingy with, for example, my son's a 5 and my wife's a 2. And so the proverbial conversation is, how was soccer practice? It was fine.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you want to exhaust me by interacting with me? Well, I'm in charge of my space, so I'm going to put up a wall and just give you as little as possible. But what's funny is fives, when they're very interested in something, they kind of do the opposite and dump truck information on you, even when you're not asking for it. Yeah, interesting. And then
Wacky.
sixes, the loyalist or the loyal slash skeptic. I think that's probably the best term, because sixes really are kind of a back and forth. They
Mhm.
are in some ways quite volatile types. Sixes, their sin is fear. And you say fear of what? It could be fear of anything. It's think of being a vigilante or the guardians at the gate. One of my favorite terms for the six is the trooper. It's think of the Marines or the motorcycle gang. It's the person that is vigilant and realizes that things could go wrong and we need to pay attention, and you need to understand what they're not telling you. And sixes are 100% for you. They are the loyalist. But if they get in any way a message from you that maybe you're not who you say you are, you're not genuine, you're not being honest or direct with them, then that person who is 100% for you may become 100% against you and flip on a dime. I always think of them as like sweet and sour, hot and spicy. It's like they're for you, and then they become the mutiny yeah, interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. I never thought about a six like that. I've only seen it, like I said, I've only done so much research, but I never seen a six like that. But the more you say it and think about, what I've learned, it makes sense. Like it's either like they're going to be loyal to what they see as true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's like they want to be on the side of truth. Just like ones, they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be and sixes sort of have what's called the obligation to doubt. And just think, it's hard to remain 100% loyal if you have an obligation to doubt. If there's always this voice in the back of your head that says, am I really sure about this? Am I really sure about this person? How do we know they're not just walking us off a cliff? Somebody needs to ask one more question. I need to ask one more question. Remember that kid in school that always had to ask one more question and the bell's ringing and everybody just groans like, oh my goodness, stop asking questions. And they
Yeah.
turn around and what do? They turn around. They're asking the question, not necessarily because they want the answer, but because somebody's got to ask questions. Somebody's got to challenge this professor, or they could just lead us over the hill. And so
Right.
the whole class groans, and this student turns around and yells at everybody, I'm sorry, I have to ask another question. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, okay.
Yeah. Would you say,
Being safe.
Batman would be a six?
Yes, 100%. Yes. Now, I'm sure that like some of the characters in some of the movies and stuff, but yes, the archetype of Batman. And think what he uses. What does
Right.
he use to his advantage? Think his fear of bats is very important to him, so he assumes that fear it will be important to others as well. And
Right.
yeah, mhm. Good
Interesting.
point. Yeah, and
Alrighty.
also
So,
I think Spider-Man's a six too.
oh yeah, I could definitely imagine that. I'm not a super like Marvel DC guy,
Yeah.
but when you were explaining a six, I was like, oh, it sounds like Batman. I just recently watched The Dark Knight, so I was like, it was fresh in my mind.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Now, if you
but
want to talk about superheroes for a second, and you got a
yeah,
lot of threes, they might really find this interesting that every Marvel villain. I need to make a video about this, but like my son is a five, made me
mhm,
watch all of the Marvel movies, and it just exhausted me. But um, uh, when you think about the Marvel villains, I think every one of them is either a three or a four, with the exception of maybe Thanos, who I think is a five. But like, it's just fascinating because you think of threes as being the heroes in the
yeah,
story, but a lot of times that's eights. But there's a lot of different Marvel heroes. But I just thought it was interesting that that three and four thing just seemed to be what Marvel landed on for all of their villains.
yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, just to kind of expand on that a little bit, it makes sense if you think about three being the villain because it would showcase or it'd stand to reason that because they're so successful and so good at what they do, it makes them a challenging foe.
Yeah. Well, and also they're not necessarily, remember, the sin is deceit. And so they're not necessarily, at least the characters they put on there, they're not necessarily behind the scenes the same person they are in public.
Interesting.
And yeah, and so they've got kind of that one of the terms for one of the subtypes is the politician. So we think of politicians, like kissing babies, meanwhile polluting the
Yeah.
waterways. All right, so seven, there you go. Here we are at seven. Seven, the enthusiast, which is a good term, the Epicurean. Remember, the Epicureans are eat, drink, and be merry, tomorrow we die. The Stoics, the fives, are kind of the opposite of that. But the enthusiast, I think, is a good term because sevens want to be excited about something.
Oh yeah.
We don't want to be boring. We don't want to be bored. And when we don't have something to be excited about, we think something's wrong and it feels like something's wrong. And so we will go out finding something to be excited about. Sevens could look quite bipolar at times. Um, by the way, every one of these can be pushed into a clinical diagnosis. Every type, if you push them to a great unhealth, they will come up with some kind of psychological disorder. But sevens, the sin is gluttony. When is enough enough? You know,
Mm,
you're making yourself miserable just trying to be happy. You're spending you're spending money you don't have, time you don't have, chasing after something that you think is going to make you happy. And in reality, you're ending up miserable, and the people around you sometimes are paying the price for your gluttony. I love electric guitars, but how
Yep.
many electric guitars does a person need? I don't need 10. You need, you can only play one at a time.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better to have one that you love? When you think of great guitarists, you see them with their guitar, but with sevens, it's like YouTube is filled with sevens like myself who have walls of stuff behind them that they're reviewing, that they're trying, that they're collecting. And it's like, you don't love any of it. You're just experimenting and playing around with things. And when sevens realize that sometimes the best way to interact in this world is to find one that you love rather than many that you have sampled, it can be a great moment for sevens that sometimes less is more. And instead of always trying to do fun things, why can't you just do anything with fun? Why can't you do all things with fun?
Right.
Fantastic thought for sevens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny that you say like sampling everything. When I was younger, I would always order the appetizer sampler platter or whatever from Applebee's, where you get to eat a bunch of different things. It wasn't like I I think about it now and I'm like, oh, it's so obvious that I was a seven. Like I didn't want to just order the boneless wings because then I wouldn't get the mozzarella sticks and, the wonton tacos or whatever the case may be. It was always the fear of missing out on something else. Like, oh, they might enjoy this more than I'm going to enjoy what I ordered. So maybe I'll just get everything, a little bit of
Yeah.
everything, a big
Yeah.
generalist.
Yeah. Right. The Renaissance man or the generalist. Right. Yeah. Good. And the reality is we end up with a lot of great experiences, but sometimes, like I said, sometimes less is more. Sometimes focus, is could take us further. And that's one of the problems with sevens is we get good at something and then we get bored with it, move on and do something else, and we sometimes never master anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so
Yeah.
eights, the sin is lust. And it's so funny when you tell an eight that. I was just talking to an eight the other day who never heard of the Enneagram, and I explained it to him. And
Mm.
he's an older guy, and he was standing there with his wife, and I said, and he was an eight, and I said, well, the sin of the eight is lust, and he just looks at me, and goes, yeah, that sounds about right. And probably only eights would be able to admit that. If any other type
Yeah.
we told them their sin was lust, they'd probably like, what? No, not me. But eights, when you think of lust, it doesn't always mean sexual. The idea is you kind of go out into the world just moving and touching things,
Mhm.
just sorting things out, and just this sense that I have the right to just step in here and start adjusting things. It's the idea that other people and their stuff exists for me to use. And if they didn't want me to, they should have spoke up. That's on them. They should have said something. They didn't say anything, then what am I supposed to do? And so eights
Yeah.
tend to be big people who just sort of grab life by the horns and expect that their presence and their involvement is going to change stuff. And often it does. They tend to be leaders, the boss, the maverick, the challenger. They tend to be leaders. And it's not necessarily that they're the best, most qualified people. It's just they don't like sitting there in indecision and waiting to be told what to do. It's like that feels like a helpless child. And I'm not going to be a helpless child. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to live my life. I'm going to own my space and own my voice, and they do, and they seem to have a lot of confidence, and so we tend to line up behind them, and they end up often being leaders. And you get back to nine, end up back at nine, and um, you know the infant or grandpa, it's kind of the same character, just
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Anyway.
man, it's so true. Any like sitcom you look at, grandpa and the infant are virtually the same character.
And nines are great. Don't get me wrong. I have a lot of appointments with nines. Nines tend to be gentle, peace loving people that don't
Yeah.
want problems. They don't want to deal with problems. They don't want to cause problems. They tend to have the outlook in life that There's a lot of things we just need to accept and understand in life. Don't fight with life. Try to get along with life and try to give space for other people and try to understand people's perspectives. And, a lot of times that works in their favor, but sometimes they can end up, maybe getting themselves in over their heads and wishing they could get out of it somehow.
Right. Alrighty. If you will let me, I want to talk a little bit more specifically about sevens and threes and just kind of go
Yep.
a little bit deeper in each of those areas. Starting with a three, what would you say are the major strengths of a three?
Oh, definitely just that sense of like, again, like eights, sevens, threes, and eights are all in a group together of the assertive types, meaning I
Mhm.
wake up in the morning, my feet hit the ground, I have a dream, a plan, an objective, an agenda. Don't get in my way. I'm going for this thing. And you can go with me, but don't try to hinder me because assertive types tend to go against people if need be to go after what they want. And threes, very focused on the next level,
Yep.
very focused on moving the organization or moving themselves to the next level, which is good. Here's the thing though, with all of us, this is huge for all of us. The very thing that we're pursuing or chasing in our average health is what we bring to share with others in our health. Okay? So with threes, think of it like this. When a three is not very sure about their value, their worth, their identity, and all those kinds of questions, then they're pursuing a sense of being a person of worth, being a person that matters. They don't want to be the sort of person that doesn't matter. They want to be the person that's succeeding and accomplishing and achieving things. When they can relax that impulse a little bit and they sort of come to grips with the fact that I am a person that matters, I do have value, whether I accomplish a lot or not, I am created in the image of God, then look, they then inspire the rest of us. Think of it like this: none of us are threes. So we need to hear their voice. And instead of being the most valuable player and being consumed with being the most valuable player, threes are now free to be the captain of the team and inspire the rest of the team and say things like, "Hey, Mike, hey, Tom, you're really good at this or that. You should work a little harder at this because I think you could be great at this." The voice that they hear in their head, they're now able to share with others and inspire and motivate the team to accomplish more, to be more, to move to the next level. Because the reality is, the rest of us, we tend to settle for status quo way too easy. And we just
Yep.
kind of plateau and we just relax and sit on our hands until a three comes into our life and says, "You know what? I think you could be great at this with a little bit of effort, with a little bit of discipline, with a little bit of training, a little bit of motivation. I think you could get to the next level." And we go, "Really? You think so?" But see, an unhealthy three can never do that job because they have to outperform everyone else. When you don't need to outperform everyone else, you join the team and make the rest of us better performers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the famous quote, "A rising tide lifts all boats."
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
the what would you say is like a major blind spot for threes outside of what you've already said?
Yeah. Well, I would say the biggest problem that I encounter with threes is when they learn about the Enneagram, their first thought is, how can I use this to accomplish and achieve even more? How can I use this system to understand people so that I can then attain the next level or the next stage of growth or the next whatever? And the Enneagram is not it's not about furthering your impulses and compulsions. It's about exposing them. All
Mm,
right. And so when you think the three's impulse is to not be satisfied with where they're at and to always feel like they have to get to the next rung in the ladder or the next hoop they have to jump through, rather than use the Enneagram to further that impulse, why don't we challenge that impulse and say, why do I feel this need so desperately to get to the next level? Here I am at the top of this wall and I've worked really hard to get to the top of this wall. Is this a wall I even care about? Am I
yeah,
happy now? Because I
yeah.
believed that getting to the top of this was going to make me happy. Okay. I was talking to a three just recently who was probably my age in their 50s, and they had a fantastic job, a ton of money, never had time for a family, never had time for to get married, never had time for kids. And They were working while I was talking to them, while I was coaching them. They booked an appointment while I was coaching them. They were still at work working. It was dark outside. It was in the evening hours, but they couldn't stop working. They can't stop moving forward. Big job, big paycheck, very successful on paper. And my question to her was this: how fulfilled are you in life? And her
I just love
response
that.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, how fulfilled are you? And her response, she said, oh, no more than 60%. Now think about that. What does that tell you? It tells you that the system that you've been operating in, that you have been running full force in, will only make you 60% fulfilled in life. So there's a problem. And the biggest problem is there's whole areas of the life that have not been attended to.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just areas that, and if you were to only focus on work and tasks and money and personal development and maybe like your physical body and all that health, well, that's only maybe at best half of what life is about. So if you gave 120% to those four areas of life, you're only going to be 50% fulfilled.
Yeah, there's a I think I don't know if you said this in the video, but you were talking about the difference between being driven and being called. And I loved that. That's something that I've started to use and say to other people, that there's a big difference in being driven versus being called. You could be driven mad, you could be driven to drink, you could be driven crazy. And I think it comes back to the point that when you're driven, you have no idea what the destination is.
Yeah.
You're just going somewhere. Like,
Yeah.
for example, in the case that you just spoke about with the three, like, to what end? What end is she looking for? And does she think that that will make her fulfilled? Well, if she's saying 60% and she's almost there, it doesn't seem likely. Versus being called, there's an end goal, there's an end state, and you're just working on getting there. And I loved
Yeah.
that. I think that spoke to me a lot. I really appreciated that
Yeah.
little
Just
bit of
think,
wisdom.
Jesus calls disciples and drives out demons.
Interesting. I'm gonna
So
have to use that one. That one,
yeah, right. So
that's
being
good.
driven, yeah, being driven feels like a good thing, but okay, who's driving? Is it you? And that's
Yeah.
one of the things the Enneagram helps us with, is how much on autopilot we are. What is autopilot? Autopilot is you are simply moving forward based on the impulses and compulsions of your personality type. If I can open up a book on the Enneagram and read about the impulses and compulsions of your type, and that's exactly what you're doing, then I know you're just moving forward by impulse, which means you're not really awake. You're not making decisions. You're just doing what comes naturally to you. Think of it like when in the days of the judges, where people did whatever was right in their own eyes.
Mhm.
Well, every type, think of it like this. Okay, the Garden of Eden, there is a right and a wrong, and God establishes it. What is the serpent's lie? You can decide right and wrong. You can be like God. Well, now think of it like this. There's 9 different rights and 9 different wrongs. And to the 7, more is the right and less is the wrong. And being funny is right, and upping the environment is right. And sadness and difficult feelings and tedious, that's wrong. And then you go over to the 1 and they might say exactly the opposite. And so we find ourselves in conflict with each other because we're all living from these perspectives that say, my right is the rightest right and your right is wrong.
Yeah, I think just to kind of close it up on threes. Well, actually, I have one more question after this. But you said that the sin of a three is deceit, and the way I see a three is like they put on a mask when they go out each day, and that mask is, who do I have to be so that people will admire me?
Yeah.
And they
Or to get
never
ahead.
really get in touch. Yeah, or to get ahead, and they never really get in touch with who they are specifically. Like
Yeah.
it's a hard thing for a three.
Yeah.
Last
Okay,
question for
let me give you the metaphor that is super painful, but this will describe it completely. And it's Easter time, right? So
yeah,
just think chocolate Easter bunny. That's the 3. Just think about
chocolate
it for a
Easter bunny
second.
is a three.
Chocolate Easter bunny. Yeah, it's the metaphor for a 3. It's so painful. Look, when you walk past the store, right, and you see that big pink box with the little happy Easter bunny with the smiley face and the carrot. I got my carrot. I'm an Easter bunny, right? But then when you buy the bunny and you take it home and you break it in half, what do you notice about the inside?
Oh, it's hollow.
It's hollow. Yeah, and
Oh,
threes aren't careful. If they're not careful, they're always working on the package. They're always working on the presentation. They got the smile, they got the carrot, they're in a beautiful wrap box, cellophane wrapped, right? But
Yeah.
if they sit for a minute, what they'll find is on the inside, there's an emptiness there. There's a hollowness there that is driving them forward because we don't want to live empty. We're not created and designed to live empty. Jesus says, I'll give you life. He says, and he says, I've come that you may be full and have life, completely and be full. But yeah, we don't live in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah. Man, that's a fantastic little metaphor. It took me a while, like a time release thing, but I got that.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Last thing for threes, what would you say is like three typical careers that a three might pursue?
Sales, threes and
Mhm.
sevens both are going to pursue sales and do well at sales because for different reasons, but we're good at reading. We're both good at reading people and
Mhm.
we're both confident. We tend to be confident people and assertive people. And sevens, it's like, I'm excited about this and I have gluttony as a sin. I want you to be excited about it. And we all share our sins with each other.
Right.
We share our sins with each other, right? And so if you're around somebody who's a seven, you're going to pick up a gluttony yourself and be like, oh wow, maybe I do need this. Maybe I didn't realize how much I need. I'd say with threes, sales is probably the first thing that comes to mind. So, the typical leadership CEO stuff. That's I always think the news anchor, the people that are like,
Yeah.
"Hi, Mary, we're coming to you live today from Seattle." It's just like they just package it right. They're smooth, they're
Yeah.
articulate. They just know how to come across. They read the room and know how to come across in a way that's professional. In fact, three wing two, the charmer, and three wing four, the professional. So realtors, I mean, that's their world, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. I kind of want to bring it to seven, but that's just to touch on what you just said. That's kind of the purpose of why I started this podcast for myself, like for selfish reasons, was I had no idea what I wanted to pursue in life. And I think it mostly came down to I had a fear of getting bored in whatever position or job that was. And so I started this podcast as a means to be like, all right, well, if I can sit down and talk to a mayor or a chef, whoever the case may be, maybe I can see what they're passionate about. Maybe I can share that passion and do that. Um, so anyways, that little side note there. So I'm gonna bring it back to a seven. What would you say are some major strengths of a seven?
Oh, personable, lighthearted, easygoing, fun-loving. I mean, think the Jim Carreys, Robin Williams, Jack Blacks of the world. The ability to lighten the mood, the ability, and sevens tend to have good hearts. We tend to not want to cause pain in life. We don't like pain. We do cause pain.
Mhm.
Sometimes we do cause pain, broken promises, and even having fun at other people's expense sometimes. But I don't think the intention is to cause pain. And I think sevens, again, tend to be very personable, charm and disarm. That's a tactic of a seven. We're soft, rebellious people. We're not hard rebellious like an eight or a six, might be. We're more like, hey, we're friends, right? So you're not gonna make me do study hall, right? Because we know each other. Remember the
Yeah.
weekend we spent it? So sevens, I think Fresh Prince, that kind of charm and disarm mentality of sevens. And it does take us far in life. I mean, we tend to be personable, we tend to get along with people. We're an assertive type, so we're often not afraid to be on a stage and talk. And we're oversharers of information sometimes. Um, and unlike fives, by the way, here's another principle that's fantastic is the type we integrate to, like
Mhm.
sevens integrate to five, in reality, we tend to, when we're healthy, do better than the person at that type. Okay, I know that probably doesn't make any sense, but some of your listeners will get it immediately, and a lot of them
Yeah.
won't. So sevens integrate to five. What I'm saying is, when sevens are integrated to five, they do five better than fives. Okay, ones do seven better than sevens because the one does it in cash where the 7 does it on a credit card. When a 1 is in that 7 place where they integrate to 7 and they're upbeat, fun loving, let their hair down and relaxed, that's because all the work has already been done and the vacation is paid for. Where a
Right.
7 is stretching themselves to stay in this upbeat, positive place. So 7s, like 5s, love information or could love information. The difference is 7s want to overshare. Like, I want everybody to know. I
Yeah.
don't need to be the smartest person in the room. I'm not a competency type like a 3, 5, or a 1. I just want to share something that is exciting and passionate. And I want you to not miss out on this great information.
Yeah. What do you think drives like I would say a 7 is definitely a jack of all trades, master of none, just a generalist.
Yeah.
Um, how do you combat that in a sense, or how do you like I don't want to say use it because then you sound like a 3, but like how would you move past that? Because it seems that it's very hard to live a life as a jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, you got to pick a couple of things you're going to stay with all your life. Yep.
And just
And
hope you don't get bored.
yeah, well, and you got okay. Well, here's the thing, right? You got to turn around. All of us have to do this. You got
Yeah.
to turn around and you got to face the dragon. Okay, so for us, it may be boredom or sadness or whatever it is. You could put different names on this. Realize that every one of us that has a dragon, think of those dragons with the 7 heads.
Mm,
Okay, so whatever those are called from mythology, we all have this dragon that's for us, it's gluttony, but it's got 7 different heads that come at us like pain, feelings, boredom, but it's one dragon. We got to turn around, we got to face that dragon, and we got to say, yes, this is difficult. Yes, this is sad. Yes, this is painful. Yes, this is boring. But I'm okay. I can do this. I can sit through this. I'm not going to die. My head isn't going to explode. My eyes aren't going to melt if I have to do something tedious and boring. I can repair this item and not have to tell everybody how miserable I am that I have to do this job. And so to be able to recognize what this dragon is that's been chasing us all of our life and then be willing to turn and face it. And for example, for 7s, that might 7s don't look like a fear or anxiety type until you make them sit still for 30 minutes. And then you'll see the anxiety. You will see that all the stuff they're doing is to try to outrun this something that is now showing up as a problem when you make them sit still. So one of the challenges I always do with 7s is sit still for 30 minutes. Do it every day for 2 weeks. No television, no phone, no music, no get up and write down ideas that pop into my head. Just make yourself sit still. Face the dragon. Because if you can't sit still and be okay, then how can you be at your kid's ball game and be okay? How can you be at Disney World and be okay? You won't be. You'll be at the best places in life and be miserable because it's not better because you're bored with it. If you
yeah.
could sit still for 30 minutes at a time, maybe you could sit through church. Maybe you could sit through a movie with your wife. Maybe you could, be okay sitting on the beach with your family.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think about myself in that sense, in that context. Like, right now I'm taking an MBA. I'm in an MBA program, and I would rather do my work at a coffee shop, just being around people. I don't need to talk to people, but just being around people because there's stuff going on, and I don't feel alone. Versus being alone and like focused and concentrate. It's something that I struggle with, and I think, as you say, probably most 7s will just struggle with solitude.
Yeah.
There's a fear of
Yes.
just being alone.
Solitude, silence, and stillness. And every type needs those 3 things. We all need them at times,
Mhm,
um, but we'll have to intentionally go after them. My wife is a brain trainer, so she works with people of all ages to help. She works with the people that are lagging behind, and she works with the people that are way out in front to
mhm.
try to help people, you know, with whatever their challenges are in life. And so ADD, ADHD, that's the world of 7s.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of like there's so much going on in our brain that we have to be in a coffee shop surrounded by noise and music and stimulation to distract that part of our brain away so that the part that we want to use to focus is able to focus. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. I feel like when I'm on purpose, when I'm focused, I feel like I can accomplish anything. But
Yes.
other than that, it's so hard to shut down my brain. Like going to bed at night, I feel like I got a million ideas. And I always say this to my wife, if I could find a job that it was solely to just brainstorm new ideas, I'd be the world's leading expert in that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to just turn off your brain. And it's funny you said that. It's just like a jamming system. All you're doing when you go to a coffee shop is just loudening the noise so that you can drown it out,
Hmm.
focus on something for a little bit.
Yeah.
What would you say are some typical careers for a 7?
Yeah. Ministry. Oh yeah. Ministry used to be the world of ones, you know, the
Yeah.
or fives, the professors and but I do see a lot of sevens in ministry. And that's a good thing, but
Yeah.
sales, a lot of sales, well, I mean, like being a seven, like if you were excited about something, you can't help but promote it. Like you want people to know about it. And so there's a genuineness to that. The problem though is the problem with us is when the conversation I have over and over with sevens is they're bored with their job
Yep.
and they were excited about it at one time, but now they've moved on and now they're excited about something else. And they feel like maybe I should quit this job and maybe I should move to the Rocky Mountains or Texas or California or like me in Florida or New York, somewhere exciting, or to Europe. It's like the grass is always greener on the other side. And so maybe I should quit this job and maybe I should just move on. I never really was happy anyway. And what happens is, if sevens aren't excited about something like they used to be, then it feels very painful to keep doing that thing. Where I
Yeah.
think most other types tend to think it's a job. You just show up, you do your job. It's
Right.
work. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be work.
Yep. It's a struggle that I face right now. I'm in IT currently, and not to bash IT, it's a great field. Like I am I feel like it's the golden handcuffs because I'm so grateful for my job. I get paid really well and it's very flexible, but it's like it sucks the life out of me. It's so boring. I just sit there behind a desk all day. And but it's something that my wife doesn't understand. She's a 1, and she's like, it's supposed to be not like you're not gonna like work every day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I understand what you're saying, and it makes logic, like it makes logical sense to me, but you have no idea how bored I am. Like it's
and
terrible. It's just
notice and
painful.
notice like the script in your head is, okay, what do I need to do to get excited about my job again?
Yeah.
You'll either think that or maybe it's time for me to be done. And what's hard to accept is maybe I just need to do this job even though it's difficult, challenging, and not as exciting as I would like it to be, and just be faithful at it. So I would say, one of the keys for sevens again is find a couple of things in life that are worth being committed to the rest of your life. Find a couple of things, because here's the deal. People might think that sevens have a difficult time being committed, and that may be true. So think of it this way. When we do actually commit to something, we have considered the cost of what that commitment will be. And often sevens can be extremely devoted and committed people because it's so challenging for us to sign our name on the dotted line and to enter into that contract. So we've already considered that cost. Find a couple of things, that there's going to be days you're going to wake up and you're not going to want to be interested in doing this thing, but I'm going to make myself do it because this is something worth being committed to. One of the real helpful ways to think about the Enneagram is think of all the numbers you're connected to. Start there. As a seven, you're connected to one. You disintegrate to one, but still there's
Mhm.
so much that ones could help us with, as being married to a one, which
Yep.
you're basically Ariel and King Triton, or Ariel and Sebastian, your relationship, 7 and a 1.
I have to watch that. I haven't seen that specific story in a while, so I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. She's a to-do list person. I mean, it's gonna make total sense to you. She's a to-do list person, and every once in a while, I'll wake up in the morning and right on the kitchen counter is a list of things for me to do.
Yep.
I don't. While on the surface, I don't like that. It helps me so much when I have a schedule. Like I feel like, all right, I may not like the fact that I'm constrained by the schedule, but I know I'll get things done. Like I
Yeah.
feel like I perform better under a schedule. So in that sense, she's like the complete complementary person to me, where she can,
Yes.
keep me on track,
Yes.
keep me moving
Yeah.
forward.
And just realize it's helpful to have that person actually exist in your life, but you could hear the wisdom of one anytime you want to. All you'd have to
Mhm.
do is ask yourself in the morning this question. Here's what a seven would ask themselves. What are we doing today? What do I want to do today? Okay. Here's what a one. One is a compliant type. One, two, and six are compliant types, meaning they comply their energy with the world around them and the needs around them. So it would be so helpful for every seven out there to begin the day asking the one question, which is, what needs to be done right now? What do I need to
Oh,
be doing?
I knew it was going to be that question. I was like, I know that that's how my wife wakes up. She's like, what do
Yeah,
I need to get done today?
yeah. Think how many pitfalls that we could avoid in our lives as sevens
Yeah.
if we could ask ourselves before life asks us. If you think of the number you disintegrate to, for sevens it's one, for threes it's nine. So for a three, it might be that nine question of, do you need to take a break today? If you don't take a break, you're going to end up broken. And for a seven, listen to the warning of the one. Is this really what you need to be doing right now? Why don't you put that down and get doing what needs to be done before you end up having to do what needs to be done? And when that point comes, you'll do it in the same spirit of a one, in anger. But if you could accept the list now as a seven, then you could go about doing what needs to be done with the joy and the
Right.
happiness and excitement of a seven.
Man, it's like gut punches all over. I love it though.
Yes.
I mean, it makes so much sense. Like, and I see it. Like, I could be, working out something that I don't love to do, and so most of the time I do it with anger. But if I were to, reframe the things like you're saying and just do it with joy, maybe I can actually stick to something.
Well, watch this. Remember how I said the three, they give away what they're searching for? Sevens
Mhm.
want satisfaction, happiness, excitement. Just think of all that stuff. Sevens are chasing that. They're
Yep.
they're literally running away from a boulder of pain, boredom, tedious, to chase satisfaction, happiness, enthusiasm, right? Well, when you can quit chasing those things, you're then free to give those things. And that's what sevens do. We enter into our groups, enter into our world, and we share happiness, excitement, enthusiasm. And really, that word enthusiasm, you guys, you have a lot of Christian listeners, right?
Yep.
In theos, God in us. And we share that joy. That's what it is. It's joy. We bring joy, or we chase happiness. When we can quit chasing happiness so much, and that's going to take sitting still for some time, and
Yep.
being okay facing the dragon. When you can quit chasing the happiness or what you think will make you happy, you're then free to bring joy into the world and inspiration.
Yeah, I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan, and one of his expressions that I love is live like no one else so that later you can live and give like no one else. And
Yeah.
and that's something I love giving to people. It's um, when I feel like I'm on purpose and I'm comfortable and I'm a healthy seven, I feel like I love giving and I love seeing people smile and laugh. Like I yearn for that. Um, but anyways, Dr. Tom LaHue, I really appreciate your time. So before we close up, you do speaking engagements. I want to have you take the floor and kind of talk about your business and kind of give the pitch a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I did not start out trying to create a business. I'm a seven. I'm not a
Yeah.
strategic going to start a business and change the world. I found something I loved, and I just
Mhm.
started talking about it. In fact, I was talking about it so much my wife said, why don't you make a YouTube channel? I think she was just trying to push
Yeah.
talk about it with somebody else. And I think sevens, we can outperform anybody if we're excited about something. And so I just started a YouTube channel basically documenting my education on the Enneagram. I was reading books and I'm talking about it. I'm reading books and talking about it. And I didn't really expect anything to happen with that, just except an outlet, because nobody at church wanted to talk about it. And anyway, and so that channel on YouTube just continued to grow and grow, and it was exciting to see it grow. And it's at about almost 50,000 subscribers now. And then during COVID, I started doing Enneagram appointments. If I was like, does anybody want to talk about this? Does anybody feel
Right.
stuck? And since then, I've had over 1,000 conversations with people. And you learn the Enneagram in a different way when you have 300 appointments with nines. You start to
Oh
hear the
yeah.
same thing,
Yeah.
right? And you tell them the stuff from the books, and then they give you back, yeah, I've tried that, and you really learn the Enneagram in a different way, having specific conversations with all these people. And then I had people saying to me, can you teach me how to do this? Can you teach me how to use the Enneagram as a model for coaching people? I had people that, I'm a life coach, I'm a counselor, I'm a teacher, I'm a pastor. Can you show me how you use the Enneagram? Like, take me behind the scenes. And so that started the first class on Zoom, the Enneagram coaching class. And then that led to other classes. I was like, yeah, but I do a lot of couples work as well. And
Right.
so there's whole things that I draw on to help with people in relationships. Because you have a husband and a wife or whatever in a marriage, you have an 8 and a 2 in a marriage. And as soon as you understand that this is an 8 and this is a 2, that affects the kind of advice and the kind of encouragement that you might give to that couple. Being aware of that, we can be over the target in just seconds or in minutes sometimes in what's going on in that marriage. So extremely valuable for marriage coaching. And so then that led to, people asking me, well, how does this fit with the Bible? And so I created another class on Enneagram and Christian life coaching, and how I integrate. The Enneagram is all threes, just like everything else, just like God reveals himself as Trinity. And
Right.
think of time, space, and matter. And every one of those breaks down into three. And the Enneagram is three basic problems: anger, worth and value, and fear, three solutions to those problems, three subtypes to every type. It's just like all the other truth we see in that God has created. And it shows us we don't live in the Garden of Eden. So anyway, then I started doing classes. Well, then people were asking me, would you come and teach this to our church leadership team? Would you teach it to our lawyers? Would you teach it to our insurance company? And so that has opened up a new, and of course, as a 7, I love to travel. So
Yeah.
invite me. I would love to come to your city and talk to your team, and try to help them be more productive, see their blind spots, be more compassionate with each other, more respectful with each other, to understand everybody's struggles and in specific ways, and to be a better team. Because again, remember, when you can quit chasing this thing, you're free to bring it. And we need the ones to show up and bring what they bring. We need the 2s to bring what they bring, 3s to bring what they bring. And when everybody is bringing their dish to the potluck dinner, there's plenty to go around.
Yeah. Well, I love your story and I love seeing you succeed, because to me, I think it's easy as a 7 to kind of fall prey to the mindset of, I'm never going to, find what it is that I love and want to carry out. And so to see a fellow 7 living out your purpose and loving what you do every day. I'm sure there's days like we talked about where you kind of dragging a little bit, but in large, you love what you do. And to me, that's so inspiring. And I love that. And I was, like I said earlier, I was so looking forward to this podcast to share that with my audience. That said, why don't you tell people where they could find you?
Yeah. Well, on YouTube, just type in Dr. Tom LaHue, or you can go to my website, tomlahue.com, TOMLAHUE,
Right.
and all my social media is on that website. And one last thing I would say about being a pastor for 30 years, sometimes people are not necessarily willing to talk about faith or religion, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of problems with all of this, right? People are hesitant for those conversations, but you know what? People will talk about personalities. They will talk about their type. And what's amazing is, as soon as we talk about personalities, it's like we've found a window into the soul. And now we get beneath the surface and we can talk about the real things that are motivating us. And remember, every one of these types is rooted in a sin. And when you start saying sin, you're moving into the world of that we inhabit as believers.
Mm.
And people won't necessarily feel comfortable talking about religion and faith, but they will talk personality types. And I can't tell you how many conversations with people around the world. And that's what's fantastic is I talk to people in Australia and New Zealand and Europe, all over South Africa. I mean, it's crazy. This has just opened this door. And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people that it has moved to the spiritual and to matters of faith. Um, and I don't push it in that direction, but
Yeah.
it's amazing how many doors have been opened because of this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's God working through you. Dr. Tom LaHue, I'm going to close it there. Like I said, I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to share this one with our guests.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.